After the decline of the Chalukya and Chola empires, the political balance of the Deccan had completely changed. This was not a simple change, but a phase in which powers that had been established for centuries were slowly breaking down, and from among them, new ambitious powers were emerging. This was the time when the Deccan was not just a battlefield of wars, but had become a land of political experiments where every ruler was not just ruling, but was struggling for identity and survival. In this changing political landscape, the Yadavas of Devagiri emerge. But the story of the Yadavas does not begin suddenly. This is not one of those dynasties that came to power in a single day. Rather, it is the result of a long process, a journey from being a feudatory to becoming a ruler, from subordination to independence. The Yadavas are also known as the Seuna dynasty. Their history goes back to around the 9th century, but the early phase is unclear. This lack of clarity itself is a sign that they were not a major power from the beginning. They were one among many local chiefs who tried to strengthen their position by staying under larger powers. For nearly 300 years, the Yadavas worked as feudatories under the Rashtrakutas and later the Chalukyas. But here one important thing must be understood. Being a feudatory is not just about subordination. It is a kind of training, a political school where you learn governance, warfare, taxation, administration, everything. But the risk is not yours. The Yadavas did exactly this. They fought for bigger empires, protected their borders, followed their orders. But during all this, they also understood how power works, where the weaknesses lie, and when it is the right time to rebel. This is the reason why, when Chalukya power started weakening, the Yadavas were ready. But before that, it is important to understand their early rulers. Very little information is available about the early history of the Yadavas. The main source is their court scholar Hemdri, who in the 12th century mentioned the early rulers of the Yadava dynasty in his works. However, this information may not be completely historical and could be partially influenced by dynastic pride. Even then, the first historically confirmed ruler is considered to be Dridhaprahara, who ruled around 860 to 880 CE. Dridhaprahara was not a great conqueror, but his importance lies in the fact that he created a stable base. He is credited with establishing the city of Chandradityapura. This was not just a city, but a sign that the Yadavas were moving towards becoming a stable power. But an important thing to note is that he was not fully independent. He was a feudatory of the Chalukyas. Here we see a deep political understanding. The Yadavas did not rush to declare independence. They waited, and this waiting continued for nearly 3 centuries. During this time, the Yadavas slowly strengthened their military power, administrative experience, and economic resources. They built their identity, but did not openly challenge. Then comes the 12th century, and this is where the story changes. The Western Chalukya Empire, which was once the most powerful force in the Deccan, started weakening. Internal conflicts, succession disputes, and external attacks, all these made it hollow from within. And history teaches us again and again, when a great power becomes weak, many smaller powers are ready to take its place. The Yadavas were one of them. The Yadava ruler Bhillama recognizes this opportunity. Bhillama was not just a warrior, but an opportunistic strategist. He understood that this was not the time to remain subordinate, but to seize power. Around 1175 CE, he comes to power, and for a few years continues as a feudatory of the Chalukyas. But this was only a formality. In reality, he was increasing his own strength. In 1187 CE, he declares independence. This was not a sudden decision. Years of preparation were behind it. He directly attacks the Chalukya capital Kalyani and captures it. This was not just a victory, it was a symbolic event. It meant that the Yadavas were no longer just a regional power, but they now saw themselves as the successors of the Chalukyas. But Bhillama does not stop here. He establishes a new capital, Devagiri. The selection of Devagiri was not accidental. It was a strategic decision. The place was naturally secure, surrounded by hills, and close to trade routes. This meant both security and economic advantage. This Devagiri later becomes the center of Yadava power. But declaring independence is easy, maintaining it is difficult. Bhillama immediately faces conflict with the Hoysalas. In the south, the Hoysalas were rising in the same way as the Yadavas were rising in the north, and a clash between the two was almost certain. Bhillama and the Hoysala ruler Ballala to fight several battles. In one battle, Bhillama wins. This shows his strength. But in the next conflict, he is defeated. This defeat is important. It shows that the Yadavas were not yet a fully established power. They still had to struggle more, strengthen their boundaries, and improve their strategies. Around 1191 CE, Bhillama dies. But what he started does not end here. Now power comes into the hands of Jaitugi. Jaitugi was a different kind of ruler. He did not focus only on expansion, but also on securing the borders. His most important campaign was against the Kakatiyas. The Kakatiyas were also an emerging power at that time. If they were not stopped in time, they could become a major threat to the Yadavas. Jaitugi fights a war and kills the Kakatiya ruler Rudra. But here he makes an interesting decision. He does not destroy the Kakatiya kingdom. Instead, he places Rudra's successor Ganpati on the throne, but under his control. This is a classic political move. Instead of ruling directly, creating a dependent ruler, this reduces administrative burden and still keeps control. This strategy makes the Yadavas a mature power. Jaitugi does not stop in the south, but also campaigns in the north. He challenges the rulers of Malwa, Gujarat, and Lata. This expansion was not just territorial, it was about prestige. Now the Yadavas were not just a power of the Deccan, but they had started marking their presence in the politics of North India as well. But the real power of the Yadavas reaches its peak during the time of Sinhana too. And from here begins the most important chapter of Yadava history. With Sinhana too, the Yadava Empire does not remain just a regional power, but it becomes the decisive power of the Deccan. But to understand this rise, it is important to understand that Sinhana did not receive a fully ready empire. He received a structure that could be strengthened, but which was still unstable. The biggest challenge in front of him was how to turn the expansion started by his predecessors into stability. Sinhana was not just a warrior, but a ruler with long-term vision. From the very beginning of his rule, he made it clear that his goal was not only to achieve victory, but to make those victories permanent. His early life was also shaped in the same direction. Born in Sinnar, Sinhana had closely observed the details of governance along with his father Jaitugi. He had understood not only warfare, but also administration, taxation system, management of feudatories, and diplomacy. And this is the reason that when he comes to power, his policies appear more mature and well-planned than before. At that time, there were three major powers in the Deccan: the Yadavas, the Hoysalas, and the Kakatiyas. The balance between them decided the politics of the region. Sinhana first challenged the power that was the biggest threat to him, the Hoysalas. The Hoysala Empire was rising rapidly in the south, and its military strength was also strong. If it was not stopped, it could expand towards the north, which would be a direct threat to the Yadavas. Sinhana recognized this threat at the right time. He adopted an aggressive policy against the Hoysalas. But this was not just direct warfare, it was a strategic campaign in which he slowly started taking control of the border regions. Important regions like Dharwad, Anantapur, Belari, Chitradurg, and Shivmoga came under his control. These were not just territories, they were very important centers from military and economic point of view. Control over these regions meant that the southern border of the Yadavas was now secured. But Sinhana does not stop here. His biggest quality was that he did not think in only one direction. After strengthening his position in the south, he immediately turned his focus towards the north. This decision was very important. Often rulers stop after achieving success in one region, but Sinhana saw expansion as a continuous process. In the north, he faced the Parmaras of Malwa and the Chalukyas of Gujarat. His conflict with the Parmara ruler Arjun Varman was not just a regional war, it was a clash between two ambitious powers. Sinhana defeated him, and with this victory, he established his power in the north as well. His campaigns against the Chalukyas of Gujarat were also in the same direction. The purpose of these wars was not just victory, but to show that the Yadavas were no longer a limited power. They had emerged as a large empire. During the reign of Sinhana, the Yadava Empire expanded from the Tungbhadra to the Narmada. This expansion was not just on the map, it was real control. And this is the point where the Yadava Empire reaches its peak. But the real strength of any empire is not measured only by its size, it is measured by its administrative capacity. Sinhana understood this. He did not just conquer his empire, but he organized it. The administrative structure was designed in such a way that balance was maintained between the center and the provinces. The provinces were controlled by military officers called Nayaks. These were not just military commanders, but also administrative officers. Their work was not only security, but also tax collection, maintaining law and order, and local governance. This system was like a double-edged sword. On one side, it provided fast and effective administration, but on the other side, it could make the Nayaks too powerful. Sinhana controlled this risk by keeping strong central authority. A well-organized council of ministers was created, in which separate officers were appointed for each department. From an economic point of view also, Sinhana's rule brought stability. Agriculture was the backbone of the empire, and special attention was given to it. Dams and tanks were built for irrigation. This not only increased production, but also helped in preventing situations like famine. But there was another important thing, the taxation system. The Yadavas organized tax collection. Posts like Shumkar officers were created who collected taxes in a systematic way. This revenue was used not only for the army and administration, but also for construction works and cultural activities. Trade also increased during this time. The Deccan had become an important trade region. From here, horses, spices, oil, and other goods were traded to different regions. Society also appeared in a stable structure during this time. The position of Brahmins was strong. They were not only religious figures, but also administrative advisors. Kshatriyas were at the center of power. Vaishyas were engaged in trade, while the condition of Shudras showed some improvement compared to earlier times. But behind this stability, there was another reality. It was a rigid social structure where each group had its own limits. In the field of religion and culture also, Sinhana's period was important. Scholars and artists received patronage in his court. Great musician Sharangdeva worked during this time, who wrote the important text Sangeet Ratnaka. This was not just a cultural achievement, it was a sign that the Yadavas were not only a war-making state, but also a developed civilization. Progress was also seen in the fields of astrology and mathematics. Scholars like Gangadeva and Ananddeva were active during this time. All this together presents a picture where the Yadava Empire was not only powerful, but also prosperous and well-organized. But history has one harsh rule. No power remains at its peak forever. And the same rule applies here as well. Sinhana's greatest achievement was that he built a vast and powerful empire. But his biggest challenge was, would his successors be able to handle it? This is the point from where the decline slowly begins. Because building an empire can be the work of one person, but maintaining it is the work of a system. And the Yadava system, as strong as it looked, was equally fragile. After Sinhana, power passes into the hands of his successors. And from here the story takes a new turn, where stability slowly starts turning into conflict. After him, Krishna comes to power. During Krishna's time, the structure of the empire remains, but the speed of expansion stops. This is a subtle change. But in history, such changes later bring big results. Krishna's rule tries to maintain stability, but it does not have the aggressive energy that was seen during Sinhana's time. After this, Mahadev comes to power. Mahadev's rule is important from an administrative point of view. During his time, scholars and administrators like Hemdri emerge. Hemdri was not just a writer, he was a policy maker. He organized the administrative structure and codified religious and social rules. But here one important thing must be understood. When an empire starts codifying its administration and traditions, it is often a sign of stability, but at the same time it also creates a kind of rigidity. And this rigidity later becomes a problem. Now the story reaches the time of Ramchandra. Ramchandra's rule is the most decisive phase in Yadava history. He comes to power around 1291 CE, but his situation is complex from the beginning. When his father Krishna dies, he is very young, so power goes into the hands of his uncle Mahadev. This means Ramchandra does not inherit power directly, he has to opt in it. And this difference is very important. When a ruler comes to power through struggle, his approach is different. Ramchandra was also an ambitious ruler. During his rule, he launches campaigns against the Parmaras, Hoysalas, Kaktiyas, and other powers. He tries to maintain and expand his empire. But by this time, the politics of the Deccan had changed. Now there were not only regional powers, a new power had emerged from North India, the Delhi Sultanate. And this power was completely new for the Deccan. 1296 CE. This is the year that changes the history of the Yadava Empire. The Sultan of Delhi, Alauddin Khilji, who is known for his expansionist vision, turns his attention towards the Deccan. But his first attack was not a large campaign. It was a fast, well-planned, and sudden attack. Ramchandra was not prepared for this. Devagiri is attacked, and the Yadava army faces defeat. This was not just a military defeat, it was a psychological shock. Ramchandra is captured. Now here the story takes an interesting turn. Usually we think that the story of a defeated ruler ends here, but politics is not so simple. In Delhi, an agreement takes place between Ramchandra and Alauddin. Ramchandra understands that he cannot face the Delhi Sultanate in direct conflict. He takes a practical decision. He accepts subordination. But this was not just surrender, it was a strategic agreement. Ramchandra promises that he will help the Delhi Sultanate in conquering the other states of South India. In return, he is again made the ruler of Devagiri. But now he was not an independent ruler, he was a feudatory. This was the same position from where the Yadavas had started their journey. It is as if history was completing a cycle. Ramchandra rules under the Delhi Sultanate. He tries to maintain stability, but his independence is now limited. In 1310 CE, Malik Kafur, who was Alauddin's trusted general, marches towards the south. And this time, Ramchandra becomes his ally. He helps him in the campaign against the Kaktiyas. This decision was practical, but its consequences were deep. This further weakens the political position of the Yadavas. Now, they are not just a regional power, but have become a tool for the expansion of the Delhi Sultanate. After the death of Ramchandra, power comes into the hands of his son Shankardeva. And from here begins the final struggle of the story. Shankardeva does not think like his father. He does not accept subordination. He wants independence. As soon as he comes to power, he rebels against the Delhi Sultanate. This was a bold decision. But was it the right time? Here a harsh truth comes forward. Rebellions are not won only by courage. They also need strength, resources, and the right timing. Shankardeva had courage, but not the rest. The Delhi Sultanate takes this rebellion seriously. Malik Kafur again marches towards the Deccan. This time the objective was clear, not just control, but complete subjugation. A war takes place. And this time the result is decisive. Shankardeva is defeated and killed. the Yadava Empire comes to an end. But was this end sudden? No, it was building slowly. Weak leadership after Sinhana, rigidity in administration, and failure to understand changing external powers at the right time, all these together prepared the fall. The attack of the Delhi Sultanate was only the final blow. The fall of the Yadava Empire gives us a deep lesson. Empires do not survive only on power. They survive on adaptability. Those who cannot change with time slowly disappear. The Yadavas built a strong empire and took it to its peak, but they could not fully adapt to the changing political situation. And this became their biggest weakness. But their contribution does not end here. They established a strong administrative structure in the Deccan, promoted agriculture and irrigation, developed trade, and supported culture. The Gondeshwar temple in Sinnar, Nashik still stands as a proof of their architecture, a monument that shows that the Yadavas were not just warriors, but also builders. Their story is a story of rise and fall. But more than that, it is a political study. How a feudatory becomes a power, how it builds an empire, and how that same empire slowly collapses under its own weight. So friends, if you like this video, then do like it and subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon. According to you, what was the biggest strength and the biggest mistake of the Yadav Empire? Do tell in the comments below. We will meet in the next video with another deep and real historical story.